Let's get the bad part of the stream out of the way early, by which I mean the entire stream. Gonna be a lot of that. I know I've talked about this, but like it's very important we understand what's going on and to what extent it's going on. So people are getting black bagged and disappeared, and this is happening in a number of ways. Most high profile, I guess, incident relating to this is the recent invocation of the Alien Enemies Act to authorize the sending of a few hundred people, not necessarily Venezuelans, criminals, undocumented people, whatever else, but people over to a gulag in El Salvador. ICE refuses to release their names because if they release their names, we could learn more about them. They say it's a national security risk. When has it ever been a national security risk to list people who have been arrested for gang membership? When has that ever happened? Please explain to me what possible national security could be I thought they were Tren de Aragua. Are they like super soldiers, infiltrators? Are they the Winter Soldier? All of them? Anyway, the ICE officials said that while many of them have criminal records, many do not. They explicitly and here you can see in the document here that many of the people who they arrested did, at least allegedly, again, habeas corpus was suspended. We don't have any way of verifying this information. According to ICE, some committed crimes, many did not. So what do you do with that? I mean, they're going to spend quite possibly the rest of their lives in a supermax prison in El Salvador, one with notable UN-monitored human rights abuses, torture, poor access to food and water, rampant disease, sexual assault, labor camps. That's the whole point, right? They're bragging about that part. So they have flatly admitted a lot of these people have committed no crimes. So that's cool. But it's not just them. There was a prominent example recently of a U.S. citizen getting swept up in Chicago some time ago. Let me get to give me the blurb. The 22 cases this article is referring to include Chicago resident Julio Noriega. I wonder why he was picked up. 54, a U.S. citizen, who, according to court documents, was arrested, handcuffed, and spent most of the night in an ICE processing center in suburban Broadview. He was never questioned about his citizenship and was only released after agents looked at his ID. They didn't look at his ID until after spending most of the night at an ICE processing center. Like, think about that. In the whole process of scooping him up and taking him over and holding him there, only hours afterward did they actually bother to look at his ID. I was born in Chicago. I'm a U.S. citizen, Noriega said in a statement, adding that on January 31st, after buying pizza in Berwyn, he was surrounded by ICE agents and arrested. Officers took away his wallet, which had his ID and social security card. They then handcuffed me and pushed me into a white van where other people were handcuffed as well. No crimes. Nothing. Just literally walking down the street. Just in Chicago, just plain daylight. Well, not daylight. So, it's nighttime, I believe, right? Just plain nighttime, walking down the street, yoinked, surrounded by ICE, goodbye. They took his ID. It was only after they looked at his ID that they arrested him. How long could they have kept him there? Especially with the Alien Enemies Act now invoked. I ask you, could they not have just sent him to El Salvador? What would have stopped them? Like, genuinely, what would have stopped them? If you're not releasing the names of people because of national security who are being sent over to El Salvador, and you've suspended habeas corpus for people who are part of Tren de Aragua, meaning that they don't get any legal rights, essentially, and you don't have to prove that they're part of Tren de Aragua, what would have prevented this man from having been sent? Now, luckily for him, this happened before the Alien Enemies Act was invoked by Trump. What would have happened if it hadn't been? Literally, what would have happened? Like, we're at that point now. Democrats should be screaming about this 24/7 if they were smart, which they're not. Yeah, well, What if he didn't have ID? What if he didn't have ID on him? He had his social security card on him, How many people have their social security card on them? In another case, Abel Orozco Ortega was detained outside his home in suburban Leons without a warrant just as he was arriving home from buying tamales. That's how they got him. That's how they knew. Federal agents were looking for one of his sons, who was about 20 years younger, but they arrested Orozco Ortega instead. Right now, the ICE, the operational protocol when they're conducting these illegal hunts is that they can arrest anyone they want in the process of pursuing the people that they have warrants for. Instead of releasing him, federal agents allegedly kept him in the back of the vehicle and purportedly created an administrative warrant while Orozco Ortega was handcuffed. He has been detained at the Clay County Jail in Indiana for about a month. They just fabricated the warrant right there. Yeah, because at the moment, and ICE has been specifically instructed to do this, in the pursuit of a person they're looking after, they've been told, you can nab anyone on the way. They're trying to pump up these numbers. You see? So now they're fabricating warrants. And by the way, if you're constructing a warrant after the arrest, that's a fabrication of the warrant. Let's not pretend otherwise. You are... they are being incentivized essentially to get as many people as possible for a wide variety of reasons, to pump up the numbers of deportations and arrests, which makes Trump look good to his supporters, at least, to funnel people into private prisons and detention facilities, to make everyone look busy. In another case, in Liberty, Missouri, 12 restaurant workers were barricaded inside a Mexican restaurant, guarded by armed DHS agents, who then arrested the workers without a warrant, according to the legal document filed on Thursday. In the document, attorneys argue the agents tried to cover up these settlement violations by allegedly providing arrest documents that were backfilled after the fact to justify the warrantless arrests. It's really bad. Vosh, why don't they just lie about the numbers? Because there is still a decent amount of oversight into the entire handling process. The thing is, the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act overrides that. Up until the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, the guarantee of habeas corpus meant that if you were arrested by ICE and you go to a processing center, lawyers can visit ICE processing centers. You can follow through with people. They might violate your rights. They might beat you. They might starve you. But for the most part, as long as you're in the United States, you have some protections. Until now. Now there is a legal through line, a pretext through which you can have your due process suspended. And all it takes is for the cops to accuse you of being a member of Tren de Aragua. Now, obviously, right now, this is being directed primarily against Latin people. It will not stay that way. There is absolutely no universe in which Trump is the first president in American history to invoke the Alien Enemies Act against a nation we're not at war with without him going further. There is absolutely, there's no way. It's like, oh, no, they'll stop here. They're going to use this to go after a wider and wider range of people. Of course, they're already going after Columbia student protesters. One had to flee the country. One is being kept in detention right now, was disappeared. It's fair to assume, by the way, that whenever you hear about like this happening to one person or a dozen people, multiply it by 10 or 100. Like if the news has caught up to this happening to 10 people, it's happened to more than 10 people. Maybe 100, maybe 1,000. You don't know. It's only been a few months. This article was published 5 days ago, but they're referring to something that happened in January, just after Trump's inauguration. In truth, we don't know. We don't know how many people are being deported down to El Salvador. We don't know how many people are in ICE detention centers. We don't know how many people have been entirely disappeared. It's possible that right now there are hundreds of concerned parents or friends calling around, unable to find people they know who have been involved in activism. They have no idea where they've gone. Maybe they've reported it to the media. Maybe the media is following up on it. Maybe they're not. We have no idea. We have no idea. Evil? Yeah, it's pretty bad. I'd say it's pretty bad. I guess it's just difficult to... I've seen the video, Adam, man. It's sort of difficult to engage with this news in a novel way, but it's, and you have to understand what's going on, how bad it is. Luckily, I was born in a pretty blue state, but I'm sorry for those who aren't. Jade314, the case we're talking about in that video was in Illinois. That was Chicago. You think ICE gives a shit? It's a federal agency. Aren't you scared they might do the same with the Sedition Act? Sign it in secret and wait a day or two for people to criticize the government? Yes. How long after he goes after naturalized citizens? In the article that we just read, this was a citizen that was picked up by ICE. We have to follow through with the text. It's already happening. Immigrants are the easy first step here, but there's just no world where the Trump administration engages in an across-the-board crackdown on, to the point of invoking the Alien Enemies Act, where he engages in across-the-board crackdown against exclusively immigrants and anti-Israel protesters. They're already looking to remove judges that oppose them, okay? We all know where this goes. You're not safe because you're not white. There are a lot of people who are arguing, or sorry, you're not safe because you're white. There are a lot of people out there arguing, I think, they're under the impression that things are moving slower than they are. If anything's been learned over the past, I don't know, 100 years of fascism, I think by the fascists, it's that they can no longer rely on the slow encroachment of selective persecution against minority groups, because for the most part, fascism has become so overwhelmingly unpopular to everyone, you kind of need to just crack down. You know? Like the American people, even a lot of Republicans, aren't going to want or abide by this slow, incremental, like years and years of buildup of increasingly dispossessed, or like less and less dispossessed people, decreasingly dispossessed people having their rights removed. In reality, you just kind of go after everyone as quickly as you can. Remember, we're only 30 days away from the DHS and DOD's joint recommendation to President Trump as to whether or not it's necessary to invoke martial law, the Insurrection Act. That's not speculative. That was one of the executive orders he wrote on the 20th, on Inauguration Day. How many days? 30 or 31. It's one of the two. They're going to use the Tesla burnings as a pretext. Yep, they've already said those people are domestic terrorists. Honestly, good Americans should use martial law against him. What is going on in your brain? That was a remarkable sentence. I don't think I could have constructed that if given the opportunity. And people say America's free, liberal democracy. Well, we're not a liberal democracy anymore. The country has changed quite a bit in the past few months. Hold on. Trump, Executive Order, Insurrection Act. Yeah, there it is. We saw this the other day, but it is important to remember. Where's the 90-day deadline? Within 90 days of this proclamation, the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall submit a joint report to the President about the conditions at the southern border of the United States and any recommendations regarding additional action that may be necessary to obtain complete operational control of the southern border, including whether to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. So what do you think? Do you think that after all of the escalation and violation of constitutional law, that they will decide against the recommendation? Or do you think that earnestly and sincerely, the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security will submit a joint recommendation that the Insurrection Act is actually the only way to keep America safe against illegals? Martial law only 30 days away. Oh boy. Yeah. What would martial law look like exactly? There's just not really like a precedent for this in American history. Not a real one. Not anything in a time scale that's comparable to our own. So, it's difficult to say. But the invocation of the Insurrection Act would probably give him broad leeway to deploy the military in response to essentially any civil unrest. So I wouldn't rely I wouldn't hold your hat up on the hopes of legal protest going very far from that point forward. Black dude here, none of this is new. Cops been snatching us up. Just stay loud and build roots, guys. We'll all be fine. I appreciate your positive attitude. It is true, by the way, that Black civil rights leaders, participants in Black Lives Matter, the Civil Rights Movement, or the Black Panther Party, have been snatched and disappeared, and that people have fought for the disclosure of what happened to them for decades in some instances. I do think, though, that there's a pretty big difference here. And there's a massive difference, both in intent and scale, between the federal government security apparatus selectively disappearing civil rights agitators, which, to be clear, I say agitators here, it's their language. I support their cause, obviously. And what we're seeing now, which is just flat revocation of civil rights across the board. You could argue that what's happened to Black Americans for decades now is a template for what's happening now, like it's informed it. But I think that this is a very unique, a unique situation. More of a difference in scale than intent, honestly. Maybe. What about the time H.W. Bush invoked it in 1992 for the LA riots? Are you familiar? I am familiar with the LA riots, yeah. I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm familiar with them.